Hi everyone, I'm UKGE and you're watching The Broken Meeple, a show where I review and rant about board games, usually more the latter. Lord of the Rings, Seven Wonders, Duel, whatever, I forget what it's called, Lord of the Rings, Duel, I forget its actual long title of it, but basically it's Seven Wonders Duel, the Lord of the Rings edition, that's all it is, and there were no pictures for this one because we were banned from taking photography, like any pictures. Even though they're sitting behind a very shallow barrier, and anybody walking past could look at the game and instantly take a picture from the outside. So yeah, I'm not sure how they were able to enforce that, but you know, last thing I need is a lawsuit.
I may be a simple country hyper chicken, but I know when we're finger licked.
Is this game amazing? It's good. But the thing is that I was worried that this was basically just going to be a Seven Wonders Duel reskin with the Lord of the Rings theme. And that's kind of what the game is. I mean, the game is pretty much Seven Wonders Duel if you just replace civilization building with Lord of the Rings. And I love Lord of the Rings, don't get me wrong. It's one of my favorite IPs. But you know, it doesn't add enough to this game that makes me want to go, oh, I'll get this one instead of the other. I mean, you play the game in exactly the same way, and believe me, even the layout of the cards that you draft from, like in Seven Wonders Duel, is exactly the same. They don't even change the layout of the cards. You know, that's how much this is a reskin. And really, the only differences that there are is in the victory conditions themselves. So military, the tug of war that you normally did, is now simply Frodo trying to get to a spot, like the volcano or whatever it is, Mount Doom, and then the Nazgul chasing after it. So it's basically a chase of catching up with Frodo. That's the military track. Other than that, functions in exactly the same way, except you don't get that many bonuses from doing the military. It just feels a little bit bare bones, that one. And then you've got the science, the green tokens. They work 95% exactly the same. It's not science anymore, or I suppose it could be, but if you've got like wizards and forging and stuff like that, they come in categories, and it's the same deal. You're trying to get 6 of the symbols to win, but if you get 2 of the same, you get to get a bonus tile. The difference here is that all the different symbols have their own set of 3 different ability tiles that you can grab. You look at 2 of the 3 and you pick one of them. So there's a bit more variety in those green tokens than there is, say, in the Seven Wonders Duel game. So that in itself is an improvement. Not going to say that every single ability is great or necessarily balanced, but it does make green a little bit more interesting in that front. But it's not like there was very little in the Seven Wonders Duel one, there just wasn't as many. And then the points that you get in the game, because normally those were the 2 main victory conditions. Well, now you've got another victory condition. You've got control of the map. You've got this tiny little map with the regions on. You put these little soldier meeples on there, and basically 1 kills 1, and it's a case of getting presents. So if you manage to have presents in all of the 7 regions, you automatically win. So you've technically got 3 auto win conditions instead of 2. But if you get to the end of the game and no one's won, then that's the tiebreaker. There's no victory points in this game. You don't count up points throughout the game and then get to the end and then count those up. It's simply, you know, most presents as a tiebreaker. Other than that, you've got to win by one of those 3 auto victory conditions. The game is fine. It's got Vincent Dutrait's artwork, so it's going to look great. Fine, but it's not like the artwork in the original was bad. The original artwork is still fantastic. But I play Seven Wonders Duel with Pantheon, or I play solo with the base game, you know, the solo thing that came out with it. This one doesn't sound like there's a solo mode included, you know, at least not for what was displayed out. And it really is just a case of pick your poison. Do you want Lord of the Rings? Do you want Civilization? If you already have Seven Wonders Duel, I can't see any reason why you would pick this one up and trash the other one. There's just no reason. I'm going to hang on to my copy of Duel with Pantheon and probably leave it at that. Now, if you're brand new and you haven't got Seven Wonders Duel, you might consider getting this one instead. That is fine, but under no account should you own both. It is completely pointless. And for people getting a lot of excitement and hype over this, it is literally Seven Wonders Duel with a minor reskin on it, and that is it. Nothing more, nothing less. That is it. So maybe just temper your expectations down a little bit unless you've never played any one of these games before, in which case do it because it's going to be amazing. World Order. World Order, this is a big one. This is the sequel to Hegemony. Now, I say sequel Understand that World Order is not Hegemony 2.0. It is not a direct sequel. It's its own game, its own genre. I mean, the Hegemony has all sorts of different like social class politics and like other mechanics in it. This one is an area control game where you control one of the factions like the Soviet Union and EU, for example, and you do various things in order to get cubes on the board and control areas for points. So you have a minor bit of asymmetry, but not a huge amount of it, certainly not compared to Hegemony, and it is really its own thing. I demoed this with Paul Grogan and a couple of others who I'm familiar with, but I did go into World Order with some trepidation because there's two things that irked me. Firstly, this is area control. Area control in a Euro game, not like American style kill each other and control areas. That is fine, but Euro style area control is probably in my bottom 5 mechanics I like. It really isn't a mechanic I go for. It's why I've not really seeked out anything like El Grande in that, because usually Euro-style area control is pretty boring. It's mostly just getting cubes on the board and there you go. It's not particularly epic or exciting. And secondly, lightning doesn't usually strike twice, right, when it comes to board games or movies and stuff like that. So, you know, it's a bit like the analogy I use for movies is the original Ghostbusters movie. You wouldn't expect Ghostbusters to work, you know, when you put it on paper. But it did. It was a great movie. It's one of the great sort of family films of the 80s. You know, it had like some cool horror elements and stuff. But like I say, that was done right. It was gritty. It had some comedy. It was a great movie. But they've never managed to replicate that since. Ghostbusters 2 has some fun little moments for nostalgia purposes, but other than that, it's not objectively a good film. And then ever since then, yeah, have the films really been any good since then? I mean, Afterlife was it Afterlife? You know, the first one with like Paul Rudd and that was fine, but honestly, that one still has flaws, and really it's mostly the young woman who plays Phoebe in it. She pretty much carries the movie, so, you know, as much as it tugs on a few nostalgia strings, they're not great, but they're never as good as the first one. Well, this one I expected to be a similar thing. Look, you're not going to recreate Hegemony for me. And so far, after a few rounds, bear in mind this is first impressions, it might be suffering that thing. Like, you know, if Hegemony was Ghostbusters, this is probably Ghostbusters 2. It does have a little bit of asymmetry, but not a lot. I didn't feel that different from the other factions. But what this game really boils down to, even with the card play and what you're doing on the map, is basically something that feels a bit like Twilight Struggle, which is not a game I'm a massive fan of. But you basically have cards that are relatively identical in your starter decks, but you can pick up more cards as the game goes on, which are different. But all these cards basically devolve around is putting a cube on the board in a map region, and whoever has the most cubes there of a color gets 8 victory points, and then second most gets 5, and then third most gets 3, and that's kind of it. Whether I choose to be diplomatic and go, right, I'm going to spend my diplomacy resource and put a cube on the Middle East, okay? Well, next person goes, well, I'm going to build a base in Nigeria and put something in Africa, okay? Cube on Africa. And then somebody else goes, well, I've got some economy, I'm going to invest $20 in Norway, and therefore I'm going to put a cube in Europe. Noticing a theme here. Most of these actions, even though they come from different sources, all boil down to put a cube on a region and do area control. That is pretty boring, I'm afraid. That's not fun. It's not that interesting to just simply put cubes on a board and see who has the most after a certain period. Now, there's definitely a little bit of back and forth. You can do a minor bit of trading with each other, but not a lot. In fact, I didn't do any trading with other people. I just relied on the allied countries that I'd already grabbed on cards. But you know, somebody might have a few more tanks out. I might have a few cubes out for more than others. But, you know, I tried to play EU as a diplomatic faction. So I was doing more of the diplomatic cards. But I could have easily just done tanks. I could have easily just done the invest stuff. And I did some of that. But I thought I was going to have all the country allies and be really differentiated. But all of us, by the end of the 3 rounds we did, had exactly the same number of allied countries. Because you don't just get them by being diplomatic. So it didn't make me feel very differentiated from anybody else. And so as much as I was kind of enjoying some of the card play and some of the back and like the tension of, oh, are you going to usurp me over there and that kind of thing, it just didn't feel as exciting. I didn't get as much of an immersion factor as I did with Hegemony, and the mechanics themselves aren't as interesting as the ones in Hegemony. Now, I know they're not the same game. This is its own different thing, but I need to play this one again. I need to try it again, solidify my thoughts, but so far I was just a little bit disappointed with this one, and maybe that's just because my bar has been like so high from Hegemony, but an area control game that feels a bit like Twilight Struggle with some extra players involved doesn't strike me as being that much fun. Now, Paul Grogan seemed to like it a lot more than the rest of us did, but the rest of us, as we were solidifying our thoughts afterwards, were definitely on a lower playing field. So maybe it's his type of game, I don't know. But yeah, I will try this one more when it comes out, but my excitement level has decreased quite a bit. All right, let's talk about another small one, Kronologic. This one I think was Hachette Games, and it's a new deduction game which has the same designers as Turing Machine. So if you play Turing Machine, you'll know who that is. But basically, this kind of has a familiar sight to something like Awkward Guests, but it plays like Turing Machine meets Cluedo. So the whole thing of like putting this like template over cards with little holes cut into them to see the code in Turing Machine and stuff like that. Well, this is similar mechanics with this. You basically have a sketchpad in front of you with you have a layout of a theatre, like a stage theatre, and there's different rooms, I think 6 different rooms, and there's 6 different hours of the time frame that you're investigating. So hour 1, hour 2, hour 3. And what you've got a selection of characters, and what you're trying to deduce is the detective has got murdered, and you're trying to figure out which time and which room the detective got murdered in. But the universal rule is that the detective is murdered in the room where he was alone with one other person. Chauffeur, maid, whatever, all these different characters. So one of them killed the detective, and you've got to find out when they were with the detective by themselves. And the way it works is that you select either an hour of the day or a person and a particular room. And so by putting the two things together, you have like the template with the cut holes and then the card for the scenario. You put it over there and it reveals like the answer to what you're doing. So for example, it could be, how many times did the chauffeur go into the foyer? Okay, and it says 2 times. It went in there twice. You reveal some of the information to everybody, but one bit of information is private to you. So if I say that, how many times did the chauffeur go into the foyer? It says twice. Okay, everybody, he went in there twice. Mark down that he went in there twice. I look at my private information and it says that one of those times was hour 4. Okay, so I got a little bit of information that everybody else doesn't get, and this works the same for everybody else. If you get a piece of information that reveals nothing new, like privately, like say it says he never went into this area, then you get to go again, so you never feel like you got a bad, unlucky roll. But the idea is that you're supposed to be able to try and piece together where the characters move to and from as the 6 hours elapsed, because each character must move every turn, and so you can kind of figure out where they went. And that's kind of the gist. There's 15 scenarios in the box. They're going to release expansions with more content as the time goes on. But even 15 games out of this one will still give you a decent amount for the price point, which I think was only £20-25, so it was pretty cheap. But I enjoyed this. This was a game I wouldn't have even looked at first. I would have thought, okay, whatever is this? My friend told me about it, said, oh yeah, this could be similar to Awkward Guess. She likes deduction games. I really like deduction games, so we kind of gel a bit on that. And I thought, you know what, I'll give this a try. Went in for a quick demo, really enjoyed it. It took us about 30 minutes to get through the game. It's nice and short, and it's just a good, snappy deduction game. Clean, simple, but works. Certainly does get the brain juices flowing. And yeah, I enjoyed it, and I look forward to grabbing a copy of this myself. Might even do a review, we shall see. But yeah, I think it's getting released in the next week or so, so I think this will be probably the easiest one to get hold of from this list. But yeah, I'm down for playing this one more. This was a good little surprise, a nice little hidden gem. Right, next one on the list, let's briefly talk about Terminus. Terminus is a really heavy game from Inside Up Games. These are the same people who did Earth, one of my favorite games of all time. So naturally, I'm interested to see what else they do. But with this one, it was essentially it's heavy, but the rules themselves aren't heavy. It's just what you've got to do in the game is heavy as hell. You're building a subway network. And everybody's got their own different stations and places that they're doing. But you have a rondel where you move your character around. You can't go backwards, you always have to go forwards. And you can go as far as you like. But it's not like what I said before where the person at the back gets another turn. It's still turn order. But it means that if you go past a certain spot and you want to do that action, you're going to have to wait until you come back all the way around. But what you're doing is that you're getting different resources like blueprints and documents and energy and stuff and construction cones, which is quite amusing. And you're using these resources in order to get rails, to get stations, to lay them out on the board, to build little buildings around the subway that can get you special abilities. You know, we only did like 1 year out of 3 in the game, and the first year is relatively straightforward compared to the other 2. So this was a bit of an introductory game to it. It looks cool. I mean, I thought it was Tool's artwork at first. It's not, it's Duel's. And, he did a lot of art during Essen last year, so this guy's making a name for himself. But when you look at the board, you think it's Tool. Seriously, look at that board and tell me that doesn't strike you as Tool. It really is very similar in its style, which means it's clean. The graphic design is very good. Things didn't appear too fiddly to see on the board or too fiddly from a rules perspective, but you still have to plan ahead. You still have a lot of stuff that you could do, and it's not a forgiving game. And this is my worry with this game. I've got a review copy coming soon, so I will do a full review on this. I think it looks great. I think it's a relatively smooth gameplay for the complexity it is, and I think that this is really going to be a good one for heavy game fans. But one thing that worries me is that this game is not forgiving. This one is one where you could paint yourself into a corner. You could start off badly, and it's not like you're going to recover very easily. So I feel that this is a game I'm going to be very bad at. One where I will start off badly, not know the best way to do my first few turns, and then suddenly it compounds and realizes, oh yeah, I'm actually not doing that well anymore. Those sort of games do irk me a little bit, but I don't think this is going to be something as bad as, say, Food Chain Magnate, for example. I think this will be a little bit more forgiving than something like that. And especially with people who have never played the game before, I think we're all going to be on a similar playing field. But yeah, that little worry aside, this still played very well for what is a very complex game. I expected it to be really fiddly and faffy, and it really wasn't. This is definitely going to be one where good tactics and strategy on the board and what actions you do are going to pay off and really reward those who love that sort of game. So we'll find out more when I play it later, but so far, I like it. I just need to try and play a full game of it to see how much that unforgiving nature is going to irk me or not. And I'll very briefly mention the other one I play from them, Draft and Write Records. It's people have told me about this one. It's basically another flip and write, except you draft the cards around the table. So when you get you choose a card, and then based on that card, you do something on your little roll and write pad. You're putting together a band, you're putting together a musical group or something, and so you've got sites that you visit, you've got the typical rows and columns mini game over here, you've got another mini game with symbols, and then you've got people that you can hire into your crew, and you mix and match the colors, and if you match the colors, you get harmony bonuses, whatever. I mean, the theme is pasted. I mean, yes, it kind of works with it, but again, it's another flip and write, and I enjoyed my time with it. I think the drafting of the cards adds a cool element to it, but when it's all said and done, it's basically another flip and write where you get some card and you do this little mechanical mini game which doesn't really make any thematic sense or any thematic connection, and it's just there to get victory points. It was smooth and it was fine, and it certainly does make you make some angsty choices, but it's another flip and write. There's nothing really extra to say about it. It does the job. Some people are going to like it, but for me, I'm kind of done with this whole genre. And if you're going to give me a game like this, you've really got to stand out. And I don't think this one stands out. I think it's just another one in the genre that is still good. It's still a good game. But again, I just can't get that excited over them. Right, let's talk about Yonder. Yonder, we literally played through like a first round, very quick session of this. This was a super fast demo, so I don't have much to say, although to be honest, it's not a huge amount of rules in this game. But basically, this is Sinister Fish's new lightweight worker placement game, and I do mean lightweight. This is pretty light, like Lords of Waterdeep level light. And it's got very nice pretty artwork, and it looks colourful on the board, but basically it's a very straightforward premise. You're building little buildings in your own little base, and you're getting resources, and you're fulfilling contracts. That's pretty much the nature of the beast, which doesn't sound that great by itself. but the spaces are simple. And what elevates this one a bit is the fact that you've got these different workers. You've got ogres and skeletons and goblins and elves and dwarfs, and each one behaves differently on the board. So ogres get twice the amount of resources. Dwarfs enable you to get discount on buildings. Skeletons don't require feeding at the end of a round. Goblins don't really have any special abilities, but you can get a lot of them. Elves are so skinny that they can share action spaces. So there's these cool little twists with the workers, but everybody has different amounts of them. Because you take a boat, a bit like in Keyflower, you take a boat at the start of the game, it has a special ability and a set number of workers on it. When you do a contract and you take one to last like the rest of the game, you have to take another boat, which has its own set of workers and its own special ability. But the other twist with this, to add a little bit of interaction, is that when you're building up your base buildings, if you utilize anybody on your own buildings, you've got to feed them at the end of a round, so pay them a food. Ogres require 2 food because they're big. But if you put them out onto the main board, they just go away and you don't have to feed them. But other players can send their workers over to your buildings, get the effect, but you get the worker for the next round. But you then have to feed the worker. So it's not always a good thing to get the extra worker if you're a bit short on food. So you've got a little bit of sort of, not quite take that, but a little bit of like, I'm giving you a worker, but you're going to have to find some food from somewhere, interaction with the players. But it just adds this cool little twist to what would be a very boring worker placement game if you didn't have these workers. I thought that we were going to play separate factions, like I'd be the skeletons and he'd be the goblins and such, but no, everybody gets use of all these different little like faction specific miniatures. They look cool. I know they're early in the design, but I hope they don't change the design because I think it's great because they look all really cool and comedic on the covers and that, but the meeples themselves in different colors and shapes basically are shaped like you would expect them to be, but they've got 2 black dots for the eyes and nothing else. So it kind of makes them look a cross between funny and creepy. And I think it works for this game. So I don't want them to change that design, but I think this is going to be a Kickstarter later in the year, I think. Maybe not too soon into the summer. But this was fine. I mean, it's not something that I would go like mad over, but I think this one felt smoother than a lot of their other games, like the Streets and Moon. Streets and Moon was fine, but man, did they get fiddly and faffy and drag on forever by the time the game ended. Villagers was a little better, but even that still dragged on a bit and had its fiddly issues. This one feels like the game length will be a bit more constrained, but also that the rules are less faffy. So this one could be the big hit for Sinister Fish Games, and so it'd be cool to see that happen. I can't really say much more than that because I only got to play, effectively a round, and it was pretty straightforward and not a huge amount happened, but simple with a twist and a little bit of interaction, and looks gorgeous. So this could be one to look out for. Definitely give one a check. Let's talk about one that wasn't even at the Expo. This one was a prototype brought by one of the guys who works at Furlan Spiel. It was good to actually meet one of them face to face, actually, because I haven't had many dealings with them in the past. I've got their games like Ark Nova and that, which I love, but I've never really spoken to anybody there. And so we had one of them come over, very enthusiastic bloke, and he taught us Black Forest. Black Forest is the sequel to Glass Road by Uri Rosenberg, and I forget the name of the other designer. I'll put it on screen, but this one is essentially Glass Road, the sequel. So the heavier sequel. Glass Road was one that I had to warm up to it. You either love it for the cards or you hate it for the cards. I've gotten used to the card system now, and certainly Glass Road as a 2-player game is fantastic. 3, pretty good. 4, maybe a bit too chaotic, but still fun. And in that one, you're basically just building buildings and managing resources. But you had those cool little resource wheels where you moved the little tokens on there to represent how many you had. But then the clock like dials, they turned as you did so. So suddenly you might have collected 5 wood. Now you've only got 4 wood because some of that got used in order to like build bricks or make glass, along with coal and charcoal and stuff. So it was a cool system and the resource wheels were fantastic. Well, this has the same thing. You've got 2 wheels with more resources on them this time and a little track for bricks. I don't know why they put that on a separate track and didn't just have it on the wheel. It's kind of odd, but hey, it's the design, whatever. But you're managing these in order to build more buildings. You've got lakes and fields and stuff, but the cards don't exist anymore. You now replace them with a map where you move a meeple around to different villages and you have to give a resource if you go to one with another player, but You move to the village spots, and the 2 action spaces in between them are what you trigger in the game, and there's even ways to swap 1 or 2 of them around as time goes on. And more will even come out as the game goes on as little jobs that you can go to at different sites. But this one is definitely a heavier version in Glass Road. I mean, man, this will cause your brain to ache. Not because the rules are complex. The rules are very straightforward. This is a very simple game to teach. But man, does it have a lot of options. This is if it tried to Glass Road tried to marry Caverna, basically, to make this game. It feels like Glass Road meets Caverna, because you have got 30 plus buildings, and they have A and B sides for variety, but you have 30 plus buildings laid out from the start that you can try to build as the game goes on. You have about, 5 times 4, about 25 odd action spaces on the board, maybe 20, 25 action spaces on the board for stuff that you do during the round. The options that you have are pretty mind-numbing. And Caverna had a similar thing, Fields of Isle has a similar thing. And I love it for that. This game gives you a lot of options, but if you play this with anybody who's analysis paralysis prone, it's going to be problematic because you have got a lot of options to consider, and obviously you're trying to be efficient with what you do, and you always think, well, should I build that? Was it worth building that? I don't know. Where am I going to get 2 glass from? Hang on, if I get some charcoal and do some bricks, I can do that, right? So there's a lot of planning and thinking that you've got to do. So certainly AP players should stay away from this game. But this game is good fun. I mean, if you didn't like the cards from Glass Road, and that was the only thing you hated in Glass Road, check this game out when it does get released. I don't know if I think maybe it's getting an Essen release. I think that's the plan, but, certainly Essen minimum, and then maybe early 25, we'll see. But yeah, this game is good. This game gives you the cool functionality of those resource wheels, combines it with a map mechanic, but gives you so many choices over what to build and what action spaces to go to. And because you've got to pay provisions in order to travel around, and you might have to give something to another player when you turn up, there's also a little bit of interaction in that regard. But it's just another one of those cases of giving me a cool mechanic and a lot of options to play with. I can play different strategies from game to game, and there's tactical opportunities that arrive when action spaces suddenly end up in a situation where it's like, oh, that'd be a pretty good combo if I combine those 2 spaces, especially if I pay the travel resource to swap that one around with there. That could create a cool thing for me. Yeah, I'm going to go over there. And these opportunities arise. The new jobs that come out are very powerful effects. I mean, I had one that gave me 3 of every single resource in the game. Like, really good. But I had to kill off 5 animals or 5 or 6 animals to do it. And I was already collecting animals, and I thought, I don't want to kill these animals. Some of them are victory points in their food, but that's a lot of resources. And eventually I relented. I went there, chuck in the animals, and got all these resources, and then got a few more animals before the end of the game. But these opportunities arrive, and it does the job. This was a prototype, but it had a lot of the decent artwork on it, so this is going to be a looker. I swear the game is going to weigh a ton for the amount of cardboard that's going to be in this. I mean, those thick tiles, you remember how many are in Glass Road? There's going to be more in this one, I can tell you that. But one thing I also liked was that the buildings were laid out on a board, where on the left of the board it gave you a symbol telling you what the buildings tend to do. So there's one for food. These buildings tend to get you more food. Water. These get you more water. These are related to animals. This is related to meat. This is related to bricks. This is related to this. And they make a very nice way of visualizing quickly, right, what do I need right now? I need more charcoal, okay? What buildings are good for charcoal? These 3. Right, let's have a look. It's a good way of focusing you on a particular aspect without making you, go mad from all the options. I wish Caverna had this with all its buildings. I swear they should make a board, a replacement board for this stat, because I think it would be amazing. But other publishers, take note. If you've got a ton of buildings on offer for people to build, try stuff like that, because I think it works quite well. But yeah, I really enjoyed my game of this. I started off badly, but was able to pick things up, and I managed to win quite well at the end. But it was a 3-player game. Didn't take too long to get through, although we were, APing a little bit, because there's, a lot to AP about. So yeah, I think this one's going to be a one to look out for. I mean, I'm definitely going to check it out when it gets a proper release. If you don't like the cards from Glass Road, then by all means check it out. But I think even if you like Glass Road, I think this will still be one to check out, because one will be easier to play than the other, and they do feel different enough. One's definitely heavier than the other. The card system is very different from the map system, so I reckon you'd be able to own both and still have a good time, and I think maybe that will be the case for me. Who knows? But yeah, Black Forest, wasn't expecting it there, but was damn glad to get into it. Now, obviously I didn't get to play everything at the Expo. Apparently Don't Starve was there. I mean, if I'd known that was there, I would have gunned for it as soon as I could. But also I didn't play the Devier game, so I didn't play Sand, I didn't play Cities. I wanted to try Spokes. Spokes looked like a really cool little racing abstract game with the bikes, where you have to exchange the little coloured sticks with the map and your board in a rondelle sequence, and you move across the track. Basically, it's kind of got like similar vibes to Automobiles, but a lot simpler, a lot more abstract, and no deck building. So that looked pretty good, but I didn't get a chance to play that either. So yeah, there was stuff that I could not play. I could not play everything there. It's not possible even if I devoted all my time to it with no open gaming. But it was still a good fun time. I mean, I even played a game of Hegemony with Mark Monk and some of his friends, and I semi-taught the game. They watched the videos, but I then taught the rest. We had a really good fun Hegemony game. They were all sold on it. They all really enjoyed it. And, even though I creamed them as the middle class, what do you expect? I've played the game like 20, 30 times. This was their first game. But they finished relatively close in the kind of 80 to 70 point range for all three of them, and they were playing State, Working, and Capitalist. Not bad at all for your first game, by the way, guys, but it was good to see how close they were. Forget where I was. I mean, I had the advantage, but, where they were I thought was pretty good. But that was a good, fun game to do, and I thought I wouldn't have to teach Hegemony at the Expo, because I seem to play it in every convention I go to. Not that that's a problem, I love Hegemony, but it still was like, oh man, will there be a convention where I don't have to play it? Well, the Expo apparently isn't so. Maybe Essen. I can't see why I would need to play Hegemony at Essen. I mean, you won't be able to play it during the show. I can't imagine anybody would bring it with them to the convention, so I might be able to escape at Essen, but you never know. There'll be some reason why somebody just conveniently has Hegemony there and we end up playing it. It could happen. I can't rule it out anymore. But, it's just one of those games that I always want to play. But yeah, the Expo was good fun, and I've still got more stuff to try. I've got to play Windmill Valley more, the Dog Park, Forever Home, Sand if I get time to do it. And obviously some of these games that demoed are going to be kickstarted, so we won't even see them and release until 2025. But there's stuff to look out for. But Black Forest, hopefully by Essen. SETI, hopefully by Essen. Some of these games that are going to be a little bit later in the year. Really looking forward to them, particularly SETI. That is still definitely my choice game to play, but yeah, there's stuff to look forward to coming up. The Expo is kind of more like a taster of what's to come in the next year or two, with a few hidden gems thrown in. Gen Con and Essen are where the big releases tend to happen, but obviously I don't have the money on the spare holiday to go all the way to Gen Con or to one of the other conventions in America like PAX Unplugged. Not saying I'll rule it out for life, but I'm going to need help, I'm going to need accommodation, or I'm going to need to volunteer with a publisher in order to manage it. But we'll see about American stuff in the future. But Essen, yeah, that's definitely going to be a big release one for this year. Hopefully not so much that it overwhelms me, but I'm definitely looking forward to it, and I will be there, so I will see you at Essen as well. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube, talk about it, share it out on social media, get it out on Facebook and all the groups that talk about the UK Games Expo. Probably a long video because I've had to reset the battery, not the battery, this thing has like a 30-minute timer on the camera, but I've had to reset it 2 or 3 times doing this video. So quite a large video I think this will be, quite a large podcast for you to listen to, but hey, none of you have complained about the length of a podcast episode, and there's a lot to talk about with this Expo, so that's just the way it is. But this will effectively be the Sunday podcast episode, so a new episode 2 weeks from then, and this one I'll release as a video with some pictures that I've taken to go along with what I've explained. So hopefully you enjoyed this one. Take care, and remember, as always, it's only a game. So bye for now, see you at the next convention, and thank you everybody who saw me at the Expo and said hi. I really appreciate it. Bye for now.